Hello, Cruising World, Mick the Suit Guy with you. It's Monday. Monday is Tips Day. And this week, I have week 2 of my review of Norwegian Star, which we went on in June from Iceland to Greenland. Last week I did the pros. This week I have my cons, and there's quite a lot of them, so I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as possible. I'm going to remind you before I start, this is our first cruise on Norwegian, so we didn't know what to expect, and these are just my opinions. You may disagree, that's absolutely fine. I am not telling you this will be the same for everybody. These are just the things that I personally didn't like. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to try and get through these quickly because there's a lot of them and I don't want to drag this video on. Firstly, the app, easily the worst I've ever seen. You could only see one day at a time. You could see the specialty dining menus, but you could not see the main dining menu, and you could only see, events one day at a time. I couldn't see what was happening over the week. You had to go to the actual dining room, take a picture of the menu, and that's the only way you could see it. And you could only see one day at a time, like I said. What we love to do is go on board, look at the menus for every day in the main dining room, decide the ones we don't really like as much, and book specialty dining those nights. You could not do that on this ship. You could also not check in for dinner on the app. You had to go get a buzzer, and when it went, you had to get in line, get a buzzer, and when it calls you, go in. So I didn't like that, and there was a lot of other things about the app I could do a whole video on, but I'm not going to. I didn't like the app. We'll leave that there. Getting in your rooms on embarkation day was a bit of a disaster. Normally, they'll say you can go in your room at like 1 o'clock, 1:30. On this ship, it was by floor, and they didn't start letting you in until about 2:30 was the first group, and that was like deck 11, and we were on deck 5. We couldn't get into our room till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I don't know if that's a one-off or that was a typical thing on Norwegian, but that really wasn't very good. The buffet up top, apart from not being very good, we'll leave that one there, but the seating area was really crowded. You could rarely get a seat. So many people on this ship, which I'll cover in a while, were playing games. And they sat there and they didn't leave those seats. Everywhere you went, there were people playing games because there's nothing else really to do on the ship. But all the seats were taken. You could rarely get a seat in the buffet area. And it was cold. We were in Iceland, so you couldn't really eat outside. And they didn't do anything about moving people that were sitting there playing games at their table. So I didn't like that. And like I said, there was literally nothing to do on this ship. I don't think there was many times there were 2 things going on at the same time in any place. There was usually, I like doing trivia. There were usually 2 trivias a day. One first thing and one like at 7 o'clock in the evening when a lot of people were at dinner. It's like, I don't know what to do about that. And the bar situation was just, it was a train wreck. It was terrible. Up top, I think they call it the pool deck. There were 3 bars, right? One had no seats. You could just go up and then get a seat elsewhere. But again, it was so cold all week, you didn't. But that's by the by. But no seats. There was one at the back that had 8 seats. It was kind of like the equivalent of like a Serenity deck on Carnival or the adult area. And there was one up top on like deck 14, I think it was. And that was a smoking bar. So no, I'm not interested in sitting at a smoking bar. That was closed most of the week. Again, irrelevant. That was due to the weather. But on a normal cruise, that's all you got up top. One bar with no seats. One bar with 8 seats, and one bar with smoking. I like sitting at a bar on a pool deck. What can I say? Couldn't do that on this ship. There was a mojito bar and there was a sake bar, but there were inside restaurants and were only open when the restaurants were open, which typically didn't start until like 5, 6 o'clock at night. And plus you're sitting in the middle of a restaurant feeling uncomfortable with people eating food all around you. Similar, there was one in the Irish bar called Oceans. That was open most of the day, but it was one little bar with maybe 8 to 10 seats in the middle of a restaurant. You get the feel. There wasn't much in real bar way of doing things. There was a bar called the Gatsby Bar, which did a bit more specialty drinks, if you like. And that was never open during the day. They were always doing other events in there that only ever opened in the evening. Now, again, that may have been because of the cruise we were on, but never opened before 5 in the time we were on board. And when it did, they had bands and music playing in there, but they played off to the side of the bar, which is kind of weird. They weren't up level. It was just weird the way they set it out. The casino bar was open, but obviously it was a little bit smoky in there, and it's in the middle of a casino with all the noise of the machines and everything going on. And they actually at each seat they did have the poker table, the poker machine, so you could play. So if you like that, it's great. But they also had a bar in the Bliss Lounge, but there was always events going on in there. So it's just like a bar at the back of an events lounge. It's not a bar per se. There's nowhere to sit at the bar. It's just you're in there. They advertise it as a bar, but you're in there watching the show, watching Deal or No Deal, watching the band, whatever it is, and then a server will come around, take your order, and go get it from the bar. It's kind of like the bar that they would have in the main theater on a Carnival cruise. So the only real bar that was open and where we spent 80% of our time was the Proof Whiskey Bar. The problem with that was, and I don't know, well, you'd think it'd be packed every day. It was never packed. We never had a problem getting a seat at the bar. And we called it the game bar after a while, because during the day, every single table, well, 90% of the tables, people were playing games. There was nothing else to do on the ship. In the restaurants, in the Ginza and Sushi restaurant, up on deck 7, they had every day until 3 p.m. They said they didn't do lunch. You couldn't get sushi for lunch, which is what I was hoping to do. People were playing games. They opened it up. They said till 3 p.m. you can do whatever you want in here. After 3 p.m. they had to leave and they get ready for dinner. So they only did dinner service in those restaurants. So that was it. I don't know what to say. It was a terrible situation if you like a drink. But it wasn't really a drinking cruise, and they may have adjusted it for that fact. I don't know. But anyway, be aware of that. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the beer list, for example, I'm a beer drinker, was completely different to what they had online. So that probably was because of where we were. But they said that Kalik, which I was looking forward to, is a Bahamian beer, but none of that on board. Stella only had it on tap in one place. So don't go by that list. Unless you're in the Caribbean, I'm sure it's probably very different. Our room steward randomly never said hello to us once during the whole cruise. And we saw him every day. We'd walk by him. He would literally look the other way, didn't even acknowledge us. They also only did daytime room service. We like doing it at night because we work a lot during the day in the cabin. Well, Julie does. I'm usually working on my abs. But so 3 days we didn't get our room cleaned because we were busy in the room. But he never said a word to us. So that was kind of weird. Certainly when he, the first day when he didn't use our names once. Didn't say goodbye on the last night. It was very weird, very weird. And we saw him on the first day. So I'd never experienced anything quite like that. And that could be just a one-off. I don't know if that's typical of the ship, but that I was kind of weird. The tender in one of the Greenland islands, Palmiot, was a complete disaster. At the beginning of the day, they only had 3 lifeboats running. They use lifeboats as tender boats. And only one could stop in the port at a time. So they started running tenders at 7 a.m. They didn't finish till 1:30 p.m. and the last tender back was at 3:30. So the last people out only had like an hour and a half in port before they had to come back on board. And they didn't make any apologies. They blamed the fog, and I can show you pictures. There was no fog. Just admit. By the end of the day, they actually had 5 tenders going and 2 could dock. So it got a bit quicker towards the end of the day. But it was too late for that because people didn't get ashore. Luckily, there wasn't much to do in the port. An hour was more than enough to walk around the port. It was just a little town in a port with no real things to do. But that's not an excuse for the way they did it. Guest services lines were very, very long, especially on the first day. Now that happens a lot, but these were exceptionally long from what I'm used to. Our friends Leela and Chuck, they got an upgrade about 5 days before the cruise, but they didn't upgrade their keys. So they gave them the keys to their old room. So they went to go in, didn't work. They had to go get in line for guest services to get the correct keys, and they were in line for over an hour. So that was not good. That was not good. In the drink package, there's no water included, no specialty coffee, energy drinks, or at all in their free at sea package, which is a bit disappointing. Kind of a big deal for us. That adds to the package. I know it does come with part of the deal of the room, but still, I was quite surprised at that. And I mentioned this earlier, that there was a lot of specialty restaurants on board, but the quality I felt was lacking. We went to the teppanyaki. They had 4 tables, which was nice, and it was busy the whole time, but they were directly back to back. So we're on one side, the other group's on the other side, and the chefs are cooking, literally touching each other's back, and they're singing, and they're out of time, and it was just awkward. And no lobster, which is kind of a big deal. And they didn't have filet mignon. They had New York strip. I'm sure a lot of people might prefer New York strip, but I prefer filet mignon. So that was kind of a big deal for me. So I really didn't enjoy the teppanyaki experience anything like as much as I normally do. In the Italian, it was very underwhelming. For $40, I wasn't impressed with it at all. It was more like I was expecting a free restaurant, I'm not going to lie. The Ginza and the steakhouse, I alluded to this last week. They were okay. I wouldn't say either were great, but they were worth the money. They were good. We didn't do the sushi or the Brazilian steakhouse. So there was a lot of restaurants on board for a small ship, but I just felt like sometimes you do too many, and quality over quantity was the deal on here. I prefer. Sorry, there were quantity over quality. I would prefer quality over quantity. We did deal or no deal, and that was a little bit disappointing. And again, I'm comparing it to other cruise lines. Let's say Carnival, you can get now 6 cards for $60, 3 cards for $60 on this ship. The prizes weren't as good. After 2, you get a scratch off, but 3, you got a 6x8 photo. $30, I think it is on Carnival. So I didn't feel like that was good. And there was very little interaction in the game. It felt like they just wanted to get it done and over with. There wasn't the same energy as you would get on other cruises. And they also did it 3, maybe 4 times during the cruise. And only once in the evening. The rest of it was in the daytime, which I thought was a bit weird. And they were not very well attended. So they, I don't know. The musicians were in a weird position. A lot of them played in a bar called Gatsby's, and they were right next to the bar. So that was kind of strange. It was just weird the way it was set up if you saw it. And they had advertised a piano bar player, but the piano bar was basically right in the middle of the main lobby in front of the coffee shop. It was very good, and it was always very busy, but it wasn't a piano bar. He was playing like at 6, 7 o'clock at night, just playing standards. It wasn't what you would call a piano bar. Let's put it this way. No towel animals. Not a problem for me, but it is for some people. And here's a weird one. So you go into the rooms and the toilets. When you first walk in, that's cool, because you got your sink, your shower with a sliding door, and then a toilet with a sliding door. And it looks really good. But then you go in the toilet and you realize how small it is. It's tidy. And you can't barely close the sliding door, and there's a handle on the wall that you would nearly always use to stand yourself up. So I was really surprised how small that was. And this is going to sound a lot of nitpicky stuff here. These are just things comparing to other ships. But in the theater, there were no drink holders, and the seats were small, and there wasn't much leg room. And again, it's an older ship, so I'm sure that's different on newer ships. 4 times we were left a message on our phone in the room to remind us about the future cruise desk. One is more than enough. And then the last real big con I'll give you is, I alluded to this earlier, there was no formal nights. No, not a huge deal, but they're referred to as freestyle dining, so they don't do a formal night, because there's only like your time dining on Carnival. There's no early and late sitting. It's just whenever you want to go. But I don't see why that means you can't have a formal night. But they didn't have any on a 10-day cruise. It was just come as you go. So, I said many, many times there in the space of 30 seconds. But overall, I really think this was the worst ship I've been on. And I've done 85 cruises across 5 different cruise lines. My biggest pro was the unlimited drinks. That's great. And also the people we met in the karaoke. But that's kind of a side. That could be terrible on another cruise. But the unlimited drinks will be there on every one. But there was a lot of cons, like I said. But we will give Norwegian another try. I don't think it's fair to judge them on one older ship. So we need to do, again, we did take advantage of that $250 onboard credit I mentioned last week. If you didn't watch last week's, if you spend $250 on a voucher on your next cruise, which can be any time of any length, it could be a 3-day cruise in 5 years, they will double it to give you $500 onboard credit. And on your first cruise, they'll give you a buy one, get one. So we basically have $1,000 onboard credit for $250. And they do promotions every now and then called a double up. And if you book under that promotion, you can use them all at the same time. So we could go on a cruise and have $1,000 onboard credit for $250. So we will definitely cruise Norwegian again, because I want to see if it's the same on a newer ship like the Prima or something. But I can't recommend this ship, I'm going to be honest. It could have been something to do with the itinerary, and there wasn't many kids, which is good, but there wasn't many younger people. It was quite a lot of older people, and just so many people playing games. But yeah, cruise was great, karaoke was great, the unlimited drinks were great, but the ports were great. Well, Norwegian, and I'll do reviews on the ports. Greenland ports, it was more a case of saying you went to Greenland, but like a Canadian port. Ooh, that'll upset Canadians. But yeah, it's my opinion. But if you like the Norwegian Star, if you like these older ships, apps, good for you. Good for you. We're all entitled to an opinion. As I always like to say, it's a matter of opinion. It's not your fault. Yours is the wrong one. I'm kidding, but you can use that. All right, subscribe to this channel if you want. Send me your tips. Send me your reviews of any cruises you have been on recently, what you liked, what you didn't like about various things. And general tips on any cruise line, I would love to get them. I will do these every Monday. Every Thursday, I put out a cabin video. And every Saturday, I put out a general video, like a ship tour or something like that. Any questions? My email is coming up at the end of this. And if I don't know the answer, I usually know people that do, so I can help you there. And with that, I will see you later, Cruising World. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget, subscribe, hit that bell, and you'll get notifications when new videos come out. And don't forget, click on the links to the left and right of me. You can watch playlists, new video suggestions, and more. Any questions? Email me, cruisingsuitguy@gmail.com. And don't forget, I'm a travel agent. Email for help.